What is the rapid soil test and why you should be using it on your farm? That's what we're going to talk about today on this episode of Blueprints Yield. Hi everyone, Mike Evans here with Calibrated Agronomy, along with Luke Holst and our friend Scott Wall from New Age Labs, the owner. We're going to talk about today is a new style of soil testing. What's been the standard soil tests that we've been doing for years for recommendations, Luke?
So yeah, in our area, it's been Bray P1 for the phosphorus, and then Mehlich extraction for all the other nutrients. And that's kind of the standard, and that's what most every grower in our area is used to. When they think of a soil test, that's what they're thinking of. And that's a lot of times, I think, the only soil test they're really aware of, mainly.
Right.
Yeah. And generally, what are you doing with those recommendations, Luke? I mean, you go what, fall, right? Most get fall. Maybe some spring guys go out there and they take a sample, every 4 years?
Yeah,
in your area?
3 to 4 years. A lot of it's on 2.5 acre grids. So we get a composite sample around a little grid point every 2.5 acres. And then depending on what the grower, some guys just choose it to adjust their flat play nitrogen. Some guys plug it into a GIS model to get a VRT script back.
Yeah.
That's kind of the two different methods we commonly see.
Yeah.
And you run those at your lab, Scott?
Yeah. Mehlich 3.
And you use them for the same purposes what Luke just explained.
Recommendations, or we just give them the numbers. For us, we're very independent. We don't recommend anything particular. So it's just, here's your numbers. You can take it to anybody you want, or we can help you out. If you can tell us what you've grown and what you want to grow, we can give you basic recommendations. But we don't say you're high, you're low, you're medium, that kind of thing. We kind of stay away from that. But yeah, Mehlich 3, basically.
Yeah. So you guys at your own lab still do the traditional stuff is basically right. But we let in with rapid soil test. And I think this is, this is, it's been a fun thing we've brought to the farm and learned a lot. Why was the decision at your lab, or what led you down the path of the rapid soil test, and kind of go into that and why you brought it to the market?
SAP tests.
Plant sap analysis.
Plant sap analysis. Yeah. We needed a test that complemented plant sap analysis. And plant sap analysis wasn't a one-off like dry tissue is. And Mehlich 3 isn't complementary to plant sap analysis. Mehlich 3 is intended to say, okay, you have this raw abundance of nutrients in your field, and it's good for this year, or it's good for 2 years or 3 years, however, you've come to develop your fertility program. But it doesn't tell us if that nutrient's readily available. In fact, we've come to learn that it's usually not. We could have 400 ppm of phosphorus by a Mehlich 3 or a Bray that you were talking about, and most of that could be bound up with calcium or aluminum or iron. So it's not necessarily readily available. It just tells us it's out there. It's kind of like knowing what's in your bank. It doesn't tell you how well you're using it. So we needed a test that complemented plant sap analysis to say, okay, here's what you're getting up into the plant. This is your report card. But if we had a deficiency, you then had to go into the investigation of, okay, well, why is it deficient? Is it a lack of availability, or is it an inhibition within the plant? Is one element inhibiting another? So if Mehlich 3 wasn't going to do it, what was the alternative? The best alternative was like saturated paste, but saturated paste was way too complicated to put into the lab and get a good turnover. So what I looked at was some of the techniques that we were using for like doing electric conductivity, which is just a very basic water soluble, just extract the salts into water. And if you looked at all the different methods, there were 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 5-to-1 in DI water. And so I started playing around with 5-to-1 extraction of nutrients, all the same nutrients that we were looking at in SAP, and then doing it 5-to-1 in DI water, just like we were doing EC, but we would be a little bit more aggressive. We agitated it for a longer period of time, and then we ran all the parameters. Mm-hmm. So the same parameters we had in SAP, we ran it for the rapid soil, and it gave us a really good look at availability. And then we had to say, okay, this paired up really nicely, and then we started looking at, okay, what would the cation balance be for a water versus a Mehlich 3? Because I still believe in Dr. Albrecht's cation-based saturation balance, but the percentages were different because we weren't really extracting it out of the soil with an acid. So we needed a little bit different balance, and we weren't using the cation exchange percentages to come up with what the balance should be. So that's how we came up with it. Really. And it works. It's kind of like, okay, my gas gauge stops working on my 2040 tractor. I don't need anything sophisticated. I just need to know I got fuel in the tank. So I use a 1x1 stick down in the gas tank. Do I have enough fuel?
Yep.
That's really what we're gauging on. And then the more we used it, we could start saying, okay, well, how much nitrogen can get me from 1 week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks? Mm-hmm. How much phosphorus, what's the balance, what's the right balances? And that's how we've developed it.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an eye opener. I mean, Luke's like, we started comparing though. I think in last year's data set, I mean, you can almost watch it to a T, like phosphorus with the rapid soil and the old leaf, right? Because I think that's one thing too, working with you at New Age, is like that rapid soil and the old leaf are comparative.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, you can almost trend line it out. And I think it's just a huge gauge, another tool in the toolbox for us to understand what the plant's going through and have that voice back. And Luke, you guys have done a lot of soil testing over there and a lot of research work, and, the one thing that, we went from Mehlich, you guys done plenty of Haney's for different various things. And now you're at the rapid soils. What that progression, like for a grower, and what you guys been able to value out of that as far as what the growers get. Well, just walk through that a little bit.
Well, so, we started to see, the same issue you see with the Mehlich, in the Bray, pretty early on, we couldn't make it correlate to anything, and then we went to the Haney and similar thing. So now we've kind of settled down in using the rapid, and just like Mike said, we've found that we can truly graph them together and the trend follows together. I guess maybe a question I'd have for you, Scott, is what would you say to somebody that's like in the journey like we were, that is starting to see, or maybe hasn't seen an issue yet with Mehlich, but why would I've already been doing this for so long, and I do it in the fall, and I do a lot of samples.
Yep.
Why should I reduce my sampling size and go to the rapid? And what's the value of it? When should I pull them? Fall, in season? Okay. Like help me. I want to change my sampling strategy. Help walk me through that.
Well, and I guess I might deflect a little bit back to you to ask how you guys are using it with your clients, because I still think the Mehlich has a value, because I don't think the SAP analysis is intended for our overall field fertility.
Okay.
It's really intended for, coupled with SAP analysis, for steering. It's that in season use. It's not there for mass balancing. And it's about availability. What is available that day when you took the SAP analysis? So, I think if somebody is already doing Mehlich, then they've already got a step up of somebody that's not doing soils already, because they have an idea of what their soil fertility is. The only thing they're missing at that point is they really don't know how well some of that nutrition is or isn't available, right? And the question becomes whether or not the nutrients that they see on that Mehlich are truly in balance. And not every Mehlich sample is created the same, right? So like for our Mehlich 3 tests, you get organic matter, you get pH, you get the total, you get both acidity and the base saturation, you get sulfur, you get phosphorus, then you get the bases, and you get a whole list of micros. So it's a pretty robust. But if you're just getting NPK, it may be, it's a basic, So at least you've got something, and there's all those degrees, right? So I think if you start doing the sap analysis, you wouldn't do rapid soil if you're not really doing sap analysis. Okay. Because I don't know that it's not coupling along with anything, right? Okay. Because you wouldn't know whether or not what you're coupling the nitrate with. If I'm running 15 ppm in nitrate, and I'm not looking at what my nitrogen uptake is in the plant, well, that doesn't really mean anything. So I think you move to rapid soil because you're doing sap, right? If I'm doing sap and I'm doing rapid soil, how often do I do Mehlich? Maybe there I can dial back to doing Mehlich once every 2, once every 3 years. I don't have to do it every year like we moved to over the last decade. Over the last decade, we started doing them more frequently because we really needed more soil fertility information. So I think you could dial that back to do a little bit less of the mass balancing.
Well, I was just going to say that I think that pairs nicely with how my fall sampling philosophy is always, the standard practice is in our area and a lot of the Corn Belt is 2.5 acre grids. And part of the, that's how the industry was set up. 2.5 acre grids plugs into these computer systems pretty well. To make a smoothed out map showing you different regions of nutrition. And one of the things I've always done with our sampling is, and it was something I was taught when I was in grad school, going for my environmental GIS. All we did was build environmental projects on using mapping software and computers is what you did. Is learned about how to build management zones. So we throw all these parameters. What's my historic yield? What's my historic satellite NDVI images? What's my slope? What's my soil type? And break the field into smaller subfields. So our sampling frequency with the Mehlich goes down with that, and we save about $3-4 an acre just by changing that up. So I think that pairs nice. It fits in the budget. So let's maybe think about going away from every 2 years or 3 years 2.5 acre grids. Let's tighten that sampling up by using landscape position. And then running the Mehlich, we've saved money. Our samples are probably just as representative to the 2.5 acre grid, and throw that towards pairing rapid and sap in season. And I think a grower could probably do that and not spend any more money than he's currently doing with his sampling strategy.
I think one of the side effects or the side bonuses to the rapid soil that we never intended, that we kind of came about with working with Jared Cook, and I think you guys have done a tremendous amount of stuff with, was the RS2, the Rapid Soil 2, where we do the rapid soil with just the lab DI water. And then we do a comparative on the same soil, and we run the same test, but instead of using lab DI water, we use the farm's supplied irrigation water, whatever their source is, and and then we look to see how that water chemistry affects the availability of nutrition or fertigation. And I think that most people would have thought it was a non-factor or minimal factor. And what we're seeing is it's a significant factor. And how effective a water treatment can be. How do you dial in that water treatment and what does it free up? I think that was not something we intended when we created that test. And it's now, I would say 50% of the rapid soils we do are now utilized in that concept of how to treat the irrigation water to free up nutrition in soil.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a similar kind of on-farm research protocol as comparative SAP, comparative rapid soil.
Yeah. It's how do you unlock the soil that's already there using what's on farm.
Mm-hmm.
I think this kind of goes back to, we get a lot of people trying to shoot holes in what we're doing, right? Oh, well, what's rapid soil? Well, is it university tested? Is it peer reviewed? Is it this? Is it that? It's like, I don't really care. We know what it's there for, and we know what we're doing, and it's usually a grower standard compare. It's kind of like grower compared, right?
Yep.
Grower standard. And so what we're looking at is on farm, this is what you got. On farm, this is what's happening when you do the same thing, but with your water versus the lab supplied water. And now we're supplying real information that the grower can use.
Yeah.
Like that dipstick in the fuel tank. It doesn't matter that nobody calibrated that piece of wood you put in the tank.
Yeah.
It's the fact that it tells me what I need to know. That's the whole point. We're telling the growers what they need to know to actually apply it on the farm to have a positive result on the farm.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Scott. It's a snapshot in time.
Yep.
It's a short time, really. I mean, you mentioned there 2 weeks is kind of what we recommend everybody to, on a pace, the sample. Do it every 2 weeks. I give you kind of a pace of what the nutrient mobility in the soil is, or availability, probably a better term, versus, I mean, to me, they're two distinctive things, and they're not really competing against each other. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
from a management perspective as a grower, and I think, you talk to guys as you get them into this, they're well, can I make fertility recs off of them? No, I mean, we're not, we're still going to do our grid sampling or whatever, like Luke was talking about, and we do it here too, is for our base fertility on our farm, make sure we're in line and all that stuff. Still need to do that.
Yep.
And this rapid soil allows us to have, it's a missing tool in the analysis, because, I think when we did tissue sampling and stuff, we'd pull samples and send them in, but it just never, we hit on it earlier. And for me as an agronomist, it's like, there's got to be more. And once we introduce this rapid soil, and especially last year when we got the data put together, and that phosphorus thing, you can just watch the old leaf and that's rapid soil, and it just trends. I mean, it is right on par. So I think it's, thank you for coming up with it.
Well, the thing is, and then we get so many people that the hair just catches on fire with so much of this stuff, because they're upset that they can't do a recommendation off of it, right? Or the amount of testing that we're talking about. The cost per acre. How am I going to afford all this? And I'm like, really? Seriously, the cost per acre. Let me break it down. If you did SAP tests, as often we say, let's say you do SAP and rapid soil across a field 7 times for the whole thing, and so let's say you bought a bundle, you're probably talking, under $1,000, easy. If it's a 500-acre field, you've spent $2 per acre. Tell me one amendment you're putting out there. Tell me one fungicide. Tell me one insecticide that you're coming anywhere close to putting out there for $2 an acre. And I can guarantee you we're going to help you out with yield and stuff for $2 an acre. But, the recommendations, the only reason we can't give recommendations is that we don't know how product A versus product B is going to change in the rapid soil. We don't know how soluble that product is.
Yep.
So we can't give you a recommendation because we don't know how that product will become available. If you just want soil chemistry where we actually can extract it, well, that's pretty straightforward. We can say if we do a Mehlich 3 and it's 400 pounds and the recommendation is you need 600 pounds, we'll put 200 pounds out there. The assumption is that the entire 200 pounds will be out in that field.
Yep.
There's no guarantee that it's plant available. we're talking about available. It's in the soil solution. Therefore, the plant should be able to take it up. That's all we're talking about at that point.
I think we talk about it calibrated as a diagnostic tool.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a fair statement to say it's a diagnostic tool more than I mean, we do use it to make recommendations, but at its heart, it's a diagnostic tool to gauge where you're at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it'll become a recommendation tool as you dial in your specific products with that specific grower's action management tool of application rate.
Yep.
If it's a drip irrigation, it's much simpler. If somebody's growing hydroponically and therefore they have a formula and therefore their formula is the exact equivalent to a rapid soil, right? Because everything's already in solution. So it's like looking at the soil in a hydroponic sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, okay, well, the rapid soil is short, so I need 10 ppm. You put more 10 ppm into the formula.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. You just don't want the formula to get out of whack between anions and cations and positive and negative charges. So,
well, and I think, there is probably a lot more value. We do a lot of work with, like you said, trying to amend water, in looking at the RSO2 and then amendments and doing the RSO2 again, in bench test trials, which are not real world, but we can get close, right? And we can mimic and predict with, using real data and real measurements, and then feed that into the laboratory with real scientific instruments and really hit the ground with a solution. But we have started to do checking rapid soil after the pivot run, real world in the field, and we have been able to pick up products that way.
There you go. That's exactly how this should be done. The lab is here to support what's going on in the real field. The research is out there.
Yep.
We're just the support for the research, the applied research. The university research is too small. It's one-to-one parameters.
Mm-hmm.
We're studying systems, right?
Yeah.
We grow in systems, not one-to-ones. And our budgets are much bigger and they're much more complex. And they have real life consequences when things don't go right. So we need things that are very applicable. We don't care if 250 PhD professors agree with it or not.
Yep.
We need to know that it is functional and it has a return on investment type application.
I think that's a good point, because to me it's not a replacement. It's another diagnostic tool for a grower to go out there and make a better management system. That's really why you brought it to the table. I mean, it's another thing I can put in my holster when I go out on the farm and have good information to make another management decision.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it in season when it counts and make changes on the go. And I think that's really, to me, the rapid soil's whole value is. And then the other side of it, and Luke, you can talk about that, as just, if you get a trend line, we call it the ebb and flow of your nutrient through the season, you can kind of chart that out and what the soil's doing. And if you make management changes, I think, talk about, this is a good one, because you guys deal with it out in your area, and we got some sub dealers that are heavy manure, and just being able to see the different, we talk management, those are stark worlds when we get into it, and what we see there. So I think for growers, if they're rotating manure or whatever, they can use this to help see what that's doing as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we've done that work, on just the bench test method, and then going out to the field and doing it that way too. And what it really helps us see is, I think a lot of people miss the antagonisms in manure.
Mm-hmm.
It's great fertility. I mean, we've used manure on our farm for a long time. I mean, we've taken farms that are in the bottom of the PI for the county, and they're 20% over the county average, from manure and managing. And it took a while to get it managed right. But I think people overlook the antagonisms that can come along with it, and, sodium and chloride and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's something the rapid soil will show you. every time. So like what I'd suggest to a farmer is pull rapid soils just out of your heavily manure fields and run that RS01 test with the distilled water. And you could also, explain how we could maybe use manure in the rapid soil, or if that's even possible.
You can, probably more. I think when you get to the manure, you have to be a little bit careful because it's so concentrated, right? And you're not going to use it as a regular irrigation piece. But I think if you take that and you dilute it down, particularly guys that may be using it as an overhead irrigation type out of a slurry pond or something like that, you can certainly look at that. You can dilute it down, and then you can use that in the RS2 to say, okay, what are you putting on there, and how is that going to either suppress, say, like phosphorus? Let's say you've got a heavy sodium load or something like that, or heavy chloride. What's that going to do to availability of phosphorus? Or is a heavy sodium going to affect potassium? Those types of things. I think that's critical to look at. Yeah. We get the same thing with guys that use a lot of chicken manure. Chicken manure is fairly cheap. It used to be free. Now it's not. But they've put it out there thinking, okay, cheap fertilizer. Well, when we do RS on those now, we see huge levels of chloride and not the return on phosphorus. We get chloride and calcium, but not so much anything else. And the chloride is really causing a problem in sap uptake, interfering with phosphorus and sulfur uptake. So, and actually the chloride is actually can inhibit nitrate. So now when you're putting out nitrate and you've got heavy chloride, phosphorus is really struggling.
You're putting it in a very compromising position. When you need it the most.
And we've seen this on our own farm before we started using the rapid soil. Now that we're using the rapid soil, that kind of completes the picture, is on those big manured fields, our Bray P test will just be through the roof. In some instances, I think it actually maxes out the lab equipment because I get back 10 samples, all the same value. It's like, well, this just has to be maxed.
Yeah, you've maxed out. Yeah. So instead of just saying greater than, they just gave you the top number.
But when we first started pulling sap, our phosphorus levels were not sky high in those manure fields. They maybe, for the soil type, they were a little better, but they just weren't. We'd expected that to correlate at first, and it didn't. And that was what we were missing, was like, because of those antagonisms. And it's mostly because of those. Now that we're learning, it's because of those antagonisms that people, we don't account for them a lot of times in the manure. And I think guys miss it. Like we were having a discussion last night, about sulfur. Well, everybody thinks there's a lot of sulfur in manure, but is it available? It smells like sulfur, but is it available?
It's mostly in hydrogen sulfide. How much are you losing as a gas when you put it out there?
So I think that is like, just even the cations, like the sodium piece is so, I think I've even talked to you on the phone about sodium and how it gets too high and how the plant will take it up over versus potassium.
Well, that can be a real problem, and I think, Dr. Albrecht showed us that even with Mehlich 3s, and Neil Kinsey will talk about this, with basic Mehlich 3 tests, is that if your potassium gets too close to the percentage of potassium, now the plant's using potassium or sodium in exchange for potassium. And when it gets in droughty conditions, the cells can't balance osmotically, and so the cells rupture instead of adjust, where it would with the potassium. And so sodium's a real problem then at that point. And so the areas where we have problems with sodium, it can be a real bugger.
And I think that's what the rapid soil's got us, thinking more advanced agronomy, just because of the information we can glean out of it. You talk, me 20 years in soil sampling, reading recommendations, I don't know I'd ever seen a chloride on a soil report. Ever. Until we did rapid soils. And now you look at it and you're going, oh, no wonder my phosphorus I can't get in the plant, right? I mean, you probably see it at the lab the most, that chloride, and we see it in our data sets, is that chloride is such so dominant at times, and it just, you're competing against it all the time.
Plants don't need chloride, so why do we measure it?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't need it, so why do we measure it? We don't measure it in the soil. We don't measure it in the fertilizers that we put out there. We don't measure it in the plant, and it never made sense to me. That's why it seems to me it's critical. I just, like we put aluminum on there. None of the plants need aluminum, but it's a great indicator as to whether or not we've got a problem in the root zone. Do we have a root disease problem? Do we have a pH problem? If we're starting to take up a lot of aluminum, we've got a really low pH problem going on in the root zone. So maybe we need to pay attention to some of the things that are
obscure,
not the things that we think the plant needs.
Yep.
Sometimes we think we overthink things. Sometimes we think we know better than Mother Nature. And maybe we should be looking for more than just what we think we know, and pay attention to the other, some of these other things that might be teaching us the epiphany moments, the ahas that we don't anticipate.
Yeah, that's a good point. And those epiphany moments are pretty stark sometimes when you start looking at new data sets and interpreting. And I think, for us and what we've just done in the last months with Rapid Soil as a group, it's always, I guess from my perspective, it's always once you get a grower and you start telling them to take Rapid Soils and you start walking them through it, and you're like, this Rapid Soil will eventually be the plant sap. And you start seeing those correlations, and it's such a powerful tool to understand the environment the root is in, because that's what we're looking for. I mean, that's where all the feed's coming from for the plant, is that root.
That's right.
And we're not worried about what's 12, in a 30-inch corn row. I don't care what's 15 inches away. It's that rhizosphere.
Yep.
And we sample in there so we can get those numbers that the plant is actually seeing. What's at the buffet table, right?
Yeah. I will tell you, plant sap, Rapid Soil, I don't think that they're overly sophisticated. I mean, they take a little bit of a nuance to understand.
Yep.
But I mean, we have Amish and Mennonite growers. We have a wide variety of individuals, and we have some people that have tried it and they leave it. We have a whole lot of people though that once they try it, they're addicted to it. And that to me tells me everything I need to know about its applicability. Because nobody does dry tissue and Mehlich 3 and says, oh, I got to have this. I got to just keep doing this and doing it and doing it.
Yep.
But boy, the people that are using SAP data and Rapid Soils, and they've caught on, they understand the data and they're applying it, and they're coming back and this is the most dynamic tool they've ever used. They're increasing yield, they're increasing quality, they're looking at nutrient density in their crops, and they're back year after year after year. And to me, that's completely satisfying for me. That tells me that we're on the right path.
Well, that's what, I really like about it, is the versatility. It is such a versatile tool. I don't think there's any other test that's kind of like that. I mean, think about what all you can do with this one test. We can look at what's released when it rains. We can look at what's released when we put our irrigation water on. We can study, with bench test trials treatments before we go to the field with them. We can put them to the field, do a comparative analysis in the field after we've irrigated products in. And then we can even, like another thing we haven't talked about yet that we've done a little bit of, is pull Rapid Soil out of the rhizosphere and pull Rapid Soil between the row.
Oh yeah.
And look at the difference.
Yep.
And we've learned some stuff even doing that. So, we've just laid out, and that's before we even get to just trend lining to SAP. So we've just laid out 5-6 different research tools in things we can build behind this one test.
Yeah.
I know you could never do that with a Mehlich or anything like that.
We talk about just the simplest thing like pH, right? The Rapid Soil teaches us on the pH how important the rhizosphere is. Everybody talks about the pH in their soil, But what do they? If you send the average guy out to do get soil samples to check their pH, where do they go? Right in the middle between the rows. And we don't care about that. We don't care about that. So that pH in the middle of the row, that's not where the plant's feeding. So the pH there doesn't mean anything. Go right in the root zone, right in the rhizosphere. And then if you tell them, okay, test that 5 days in a row at different times in the 5 different days, and that pH will be different every one of those 5 days at those different 5 times, because the plant's constantly putting different root exudates in or taking something out, and it's shifting all the time. And so this whole concept of one pH taken in the spring or in the fall is ridiculous. You know, you might put online because, you're way off, but it's never going to stay at any one place because the plant's putting root exudates in. It's constantly shifting. That's how it's taking up nutrition. In order to take up nitrate, it has to put out hydroxyls. If it's going to take up ammonia, it's got to put out hydrogen. Well, that's changing the pH, and it does that for every element that it's trying to take up.
That's a great point. It's a dynamic system. It's
highly
fluid.
Dynamic.
It's fluid all the time, and that you brought up the pH, and that's some of the people trying to learn rapid soils that we're consulting with, and that's the first thing they'll look at. Well, my pH doesn't match my Mehlich 3.
Nope.
And I'm like, it's not going to.
Never going to.
It's not going to. And I think you did a great job explaining that. If you're doing it in the rhizosphere, you're going to get those fluctuations because that's what the roots or the plants doing to the soil at that moment in time and trying to change its environment to get what it wants. Correct?
Yeah, exactly. I think, one of the calibrated ag partners that you have, Jared Cook, with he's talking about the soil moisture probes, right? I've seen on LinkedIn. Well, if that soil moisture probe was in the rhizosphere and it could do pH, think about how many shifts that it would be recording about pH in the rhizosphere. And I think, I think it would be fascinating to see some of those shifts constantly.
On the pH subject, is there any major insights that you've gleaned a guy should look for if he looks at that rabbit soil pH? Like if it's low, what are some risk factors? If it's above neutral, what are some of the?
Well, so 90 to 95% of all SAP data is deficient in micronutrients, right? So a couple different things go on there. If we're just talking chemistry, the biggest problem is that most everybody has their pH running in around the 7 range. Well, there's a problem with micronutrients right there, because most micronutrients are what I would put in the category of a metal, right? I mean, even though everything's theoretically a metal.
A lot of the most important ones are transition metals, and they're all right beside each other.
But you got copper and iron and manganese and zinc. Well, those four right there all have to be reduced. So they have to be in a reduced state, not an oxidized state. Well, we need a lower pH to get to that. So if we're above 6.5 in the rhizosphere, we're making it very hard for those to be taken up. So we need the rhizosphere to be in that 6.2 to 6.5 range, which is actually quite ideal for our phosphorus. If we get below 6.2, we're really making it hard on phosphorus. We'll make it easier for the micronutrients like, iron, aluminum, and all those kind of things. But we're going to make it harder on the phosphorus because now the phosphorus is going to bind up with aluminum. So all these different things kind of really come into play. If we get too high, we make it hard on the micronutrients, but now the phosphorus is going to bind with calcium. So, we've got a particularly sweet spot for phosphorus to want to be in solution. So the rhizosphere is critical. And you guys know microbiology far more than I do, even though I have a pH microbiologist on staff, but that's mostly for food safety. But, microbes want a stable, kind of a stable environment. And so you don't want that pH going from 7.2 down to 5.5. They want to stabilize it, and I think you get a different population when you're at 7.2 than you have when you're at 6.2.
You definitely will. And you're right. I mean, we see it. It's one of the challenges of making stable biological products is that they will try to make the pH neutral. The populations will change, and something will die, something will ramp up, and you can lower the pH of a solution, and then on its own, it will try to return to neutral because the microbiology does that.
Yep.
I thought that was really good how you explained the pH in the micronutrients, and I would implore people to, it's something we've all seen, that graph. The pH availability graph that's in every handbook. I've seen it at countless traditional agronomy meetings. It's always used just in the context of liming your soil.
Yeah.
After listening to that, I would implore guys to take a look at that and go back and look at that again, because it will show exactly what you're talking about. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, some of these micronutrients, you need to get down there a ways before, and even on that graph will show they become available.
Yep. Yeah.
And so that data it's been out there and used countless times. I mean, you were in retail.
Yeah.
I've done traditional, precision ag work for over a decade. Been to countless of these meetings, and I've seen that 100 times. Never had it explained that way and about the effects in the rhizosphere.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that if we're not going to do a better job of allowing the rhizosphere pH to be in the right location, which is one of the reasons why we say this, micronutrients have to go on foliar. You're not gonna correct deficiencies in micronutrients through the rhizosphere, so don't bother. Use a good foliar program. Understand that that's what you're going to do. Just realize that it's not like putting stuff on soil. It's like taking insulin. You have to do it often and measured. You don't put it out in big chunks. Put it out in a little bit, but put it out often. Otherwise you can really screw things up the wrong way too.
Yeah.
But the rapid soil and the rapid soil really isn't particularly great for micronutrients. Most of those don't like to come out of solution, but they do. They show up.
Yep.
But it's not its strength.
Well, I tell you how we've used it. Yeah, I mean, we've looked at hundreds upon hundreds of these. And the micronutrients trends I always see is aluminum and iron always show up. It doesn't seem to matter
most
where we go.
Most abundant elements in the soil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have used it to look at potential water treatment products that will free up some that's tied up to the soil. Then we will see some come into solution from using a different this or that product.
Yeah.
Our Hydrant Co product is one in particular. Like, it seems to free up some micronutrients that others don't, and we can see that in the rapid soil.
I think if you can use that to figure out how to get some phosphites to free up zinc, where it's holding, especially on those heavy manured fields, because some of that phosphites holding on to zinc. That might be another way to use some of that to see if you can bounce up some of that soluble zinc. That would be another way to look at some of that kind of stuff. So a lot of great ways to use some of this stuff. Very simple. It's a simple tool, but it's got a lot of places where we can still use it.
Yeah, and it's no different. When you say simple, it's no different than pulling a traditional soil sample either. You just go out there. Nothing special. Pull a dirt sample like you would for anything else. Send it in. And you guys run the analysis. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're taking it from within the root zone. So, different crops have different root zones. So, if you've got a really shallow crop, like we've got some calibrated guys that do sod farms, that's a very shallow. Don't bother going 6 inches down. That if the roots aren't down there, don't bother taking the soil sample from there. But if you've got something that's down 13 inches, make sure you're getting that. If you're not taking out, if there's not little pieces of root hair in there, you've sampled wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's great. He's Luke Holst. That's our friend from New Age Lab, Scott Wall. Appreciate the travel to Michigan to come talk with us. If you want to learn more about rapid soils and how it can help your farm, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Blueprints of Yield.